memorize the books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts of the Apostles, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude and Revelation. You ever have all them ends, Paul's books run together on them? I almost did that to me tonight. Revelation chapter 17. Tonight we're studying one of those chapters. I got to tell you, I've got a lot of favorite chapters in the Bible, but this ain't one of them. I don't like talking about what the devil's up to. I think he gets more than enough time on TV and everything. I want to talk about what God's doing and what we're supposed to be doing. But tonight is one of those times when we've got to talk about what's happening on the other side of things. Okay? Now, if you'll remember, back when we did Revelation 13, we had the unpleasant job of looking at two beasts. One that came up out of the ocean and one that came up out of the earth. One we ended up dubbing just the beast, or some people call him the Antichrist, a man, a world ruler that's coming during the tribulation. The second one had two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And last time, in 16, he was called the false prophet. So the Antichrist and the false prophet are going to head up this world system in the last days. Okay? Now in Revelation 14, we got a very important key, a name, a word that's going to be part of this end time plan. And that's Revelation 14 and 8. Who has that?
And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication.
Okay, suddenly in the middle of all the things that were going on in Revelation 14, it's like it's a sudden commercial. Just zip right through the middle of the thing. An angel just passed through and mentions Babylon. We never talked about Babylon in all Revelation up to then. Okay? That name pops up again in Revelation 16 and 19. Who has it?
And the great city was valued for 3 parts, and the cities of the nations failed. And great Babylon came into members before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath.
Again, Babylon is mentioned, and again, judgment is mentioned against Babylon. Now, tonight we're going to talk about Babylon for the 3rd time in Revelation. And tonight, that's what this whole chapter is going to be about. Okay? It's about a world religious system. Okay? The Church of Jesus Christ has many names. Okay? What is another name for the Church of Jesus Christ? The bride, the body of Christ, right? The assembly of the believers. But the bride is the one I want us to think about tonight. Okay? The bride. Because if there's any picture, when it comes to looking at beautiful things, a bride on her wedding day, it's hard to beat that. A beautiful bride coming in. And that's the picture Jesus picked, that God picked, to say, this is what I want my church to look like. Okay? Pure, chaste, virtuous woman. Okay? Tonight we're going to see the very other end of the spectrum. And remember now, God determined that the bride was a term to be used for a religious system. A religious system is to be described as a woman. And we're going to see another woman tonight, but a very different woman. There came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither. I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Already, although we haven't heard the name, listening to the verse in 14 and the verse in 16, you can see where we're probably headed here. Okay? There's no more pretty picture than a virtuous woman, a bride. And there's no more grotesque picture than a whore or a prostitute. That's the picture that God is drawing here now, okay? I don't even like dealing with that term, but that's His term for this, and that's the way we need to call it. In fact, all through the Bible, you'll see probably the term fornication and adultery pop up more than any one thing when they're talking about sin. And most of the time, it's talking about the literal side of that. A person literally committing fornication, which is what? That would be sex outside of marriage, right? Basically, anything like that. And adultery, which is unfaithfulness in a marriage. But a lot of times, you'll read, especially in the Old Testament and in Paul's writings a lot, it mentions fornication and adultery, but it's not talking about a man and a woman. Okay, it's talking about a spiritual thing, where we're supposed to be wed to Christ, and we're taking after other things. Or we're not wed to Christ at all, and we're just taking after everything in the world. Spiritual fornication and spiritual adultery. Okay? The same picture that you see in the flesh, see, is the spiritual side of what God's talking about. Hosea 1 and 2, the book of Hosea is one of those books that draws one of the clearest parallels of this of anywhere in the Scripture. Hosea is given an unusual task. He's a godly man. God says, I want you to go out and marry a prostitute. Clayton? No, let's pick on Ricky. Ricky? God said go out and marry a prostitute. Is that going to be an easy thing to do? It'd be easy to find one, but that would be a hard thing to do for anybody, much less a godly man. Okay, because our idea of weddings and marriage is a lifelong commitment, one-to-one, and a prostitute is the most furthest moved away from that there could be, okay? Why did God ask one of His men to marry a prostitute? Okay, Hosea 1 and 2 has a key to that whole story. Who has that?
The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said unto Hosea, Go take unto thee a wife for them, and children for them, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departed from the Lord.
Israel, the nation, had committed whoredom. Now, they hadn't gone into the prostitute business, although that was probably one of the things going on. What it is saying is they had spiritually taken up with everything in that they were following other nations and other gods and not following the God of the Bible. And to God, that's fornication. Okay? There's no deeper pain than you would feel if you suddenly were to discover that your beloved was unfaithful. That would be a deep, deep pain. That's a pain I'd wish on no person. But that's the pain God feels, guess what? When we don't follow Him. Hear me carefully. When we take up with the world, God feels just as bad about it as you would if your spouse cheated on you. Imagine the pain of that. That's how God feels when we don't follow Him as we should. That's the picture He's painting here. Okay? We've got the city of Babylon, and there's one other city that pops up in Scripture more than any other city. What city is that? The city of Jerusalem. The city where Jesus ministered. The city where the Jews, that was the capital of their nation. What does Salem mean? Peace. Jerusalem. Peace. Okay, Babylon, that city was originally called a shorter name than Babylon. What was it? Who remembers? We've talked about it before. Babel. What does Babel mean?
Confusion.
Confusion. There's two cities chosen out of all of history. One of them is Jerusalem, God's city. Peace. He chooses peace. The other city is just as chosen, but it was chosen by Satan. The false religious system that started this side of the flood started at Babel with that story of that tower. And that's confusion. Do you see the picture God's drawing in the Spirit? It's peace versus confusion all through the Old Testament. And you see it happen over and over again. And when God's people that lived at Jerusalem finally turned from God, Who conquered them? Who conquered them? Who conquered Jerusalem, Charlie? The first time, when they were first taken into captivity, who conquered them?
They were conquered 3 or 4 times.
Okay. When the two southern tribes fell, when they were taken into captivity by Babylon. See, Jerusalem was conquered by Babylon. There was a constant warring between these two factions. 300 years before Jesus was born, Greece was the great empire of that day. Herodotus, an historian, went around and studied all cultures of that day, all religions of that day. He was one of the most learned men of his generation. He came to one conclusion. All the religions of the world came from, guess where? Babylon. Exactly right. Now, this was a lost Greek historian. But he knew more than anybody in that day about the religions of the day, and he could plainly see in his day, 300 years before the birth of Jesus, that all the religions in the world come from Babylon, from back at the Tower of Babel, when all that began. Now, the other city we see in Revelation 21, verses 1 and 2. Who has that?
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth was passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband.
Okay. New Jerusalem. Now, that's not tonight's study, but I just love that chapter. I want to talk about it for a minute. The New Jerusalem is where Jerusalem's finally headed. Okay? And once again, that's God's peace upon man. That city is going to be very different from any city we've seen before. How long is that city? Who knows? Who studied that knows? Roughly how long is that city? And how wide? And how high? Roughly between, depending on who you're looking at, 1,300 to 1,500 miles long. In other words, I go up to the Kentucky border, get my little car and go put that way, and I go down to the end of Florida. I've gone about 1,500 miles. I made a little square one time using a map. Get you a map of the United States one time and get your scale and make a little square that'll be 1,500 miles square, and then lay it down on that map and see how big. In other words, that city is going to cover from Kentucky down to Florida, all the way over to the eastern seaboard. That's how big this one city will be. And it's also going to be that high. And it says it's had 12 foundations or 12 floors in it. Every 100 miles or so up, there's going to be another level where people will be living. Bigger than anything we've ever imagined. More than enough, by the way, more than enough room to hold everybody that was ever born. Far more room, more than enough room to hold them, and plenty over. Because that's God's original intention, is that everyone would be saved. Verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman set upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, any of you that's followed in our lessons up now, 7 heads and 10 horns, automatically your antenna ought to go up. We've talked about that a time or two before, haven't we? Things with 7 heads and 10 horns. Let's go back and pick up a verse that tells us what that is. Revelation 12, verses 3 and 4. Who has that?
And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Who's the dragon? Who's the dragon? Satan. It's very clear. You can read the rest of that chapter and it makes it very clear. It's old Slewfoot. It's the devil. Okay? Now the beast is also considered the Antichrist, but remember, this man during that period is not doing something great by himself. You realize Hitler didn't shake the world by himself? That little Austrian wallpaper hanger, or whatever it is they used to call him, Adolf Scheckelgruber, which was his original name before he changed it to Hitler. That man did not shake the world by himself. Something else was behind him, giving him that power. Who do you think gave him his power? Satan. Sure wasn't Jesus, was it? See, that's the same thing we're talking about. The devil and his man is so linked together, they can't be separated. And Brother Baker, shouldn't that be true of us too? Us and our God should be so close together that we shouldn't, you look at one and you'll see the other. That's what it's supposed to be for us too. Verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abomination and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, if Mystery Babylon is a false religion, and she's the mother of harlots, what's all the little harlots going to be? Okay, let's go back to church this morning. The kids were here, and I said if mama cows have what kind of babies? Baby cows. Dogs have puppies. A false religious system is going to have little false religions running all over the world. Would that describe what's going on today? Are there all kind of little false religions all over the world that seem to be the same, but they're very different, and sometimes they argue with each other? The only thing they really agree on is the Christians are the ones that are wrong. And we're right. That's about the only point all those little religions agree on. But this is the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints. Now you can read the Old Testament, the New Testament. You can read Fox's Book of Martyrs, a little book that we give out, The Trail of Blood. Who was reading? Jim, you and I are talking about reading that. All through history, the saints have been killed by those following false religious systems. With the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said to me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. Now that's a tricky little verse right there, isn't it? There has been more discussion over this verse than just about any verse in Revelation. A lot of people try to guess who the Antichrist is going to be using that verse. Has anybody ever heard it said that some people feel Judas Iscariot is the Antichrist and he's going to come back? There is a belief, a lot of scholars think it could be him coming back. See, he lived, is he alive when John writes this? He's dead here. And he said he's coming back. So some people feel from that it could be Judas. Also because it mentions perdition, and Judas was called the son of what? Perdition. Now if you don't believe that, that's okay. I don't buy that, but I want to tell you what everybody's thinking. There's another evil ruler that lived just before this time. He burned the city of Rome to the ground. Many people called him the Antichrist in this day. He had Christians thrown to the lions, burned at the stake. He had the Apostle Paul beheaded. Who was that?
Nero.
The Emperor Nero. Is Nero alive at this time? He's dead. He was killed the year after he killed Paul, by the way. And his own guards killed him. But Nero is a man that was alive and is not, and they said maybe he'll come again. So some people think the Emperor Nero could be the Antichrist. Do you think that's who it is? I don't think so. I think it's going to be whoever Satan picks. He can pick whoever he wants. It could be a Skid Row bum when he picks him. You're going to see a man suddenly rise to power out of nowhere. And when he gets to the top, then they'll know that's the man. But they won't know that till the tribulation gets here, so we might as well not look for him. We don't know who he is. This idea of Mystery Babylon being the mother of harlots also goes back to the original concept of Babylon and Babel. Let's go all the way back for a minute to Genesis chapter 11. You remember the story in Genesis 11 where all the people came together and they decided to build something right after the flood. What did they decide to build? A tower, a city and a tower. God had told them to spread out and multiply. And they said, no, we'll all stay together and build a city and stay together lest we perish, and we also want to make a name for ourselves. So they built a city and a tower called Babel. And God didn't seem to think too much of what they wanted to do. Genesis 11 verses 6 and 7 gives God's opinion of the original tower. Who has that?
And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech.
Okay, right after the flood, roughly 100 years after the flood, all these guys came together and went to building this city and this tower. God saw there was a great danger there, and he confounded their language and spread them out. But I want to get the idea that it mentions in that story they wanted to be one. One people. Now that sounds like it'd be okay. But what we're talking about is they wanted to be a one world government with them running the show. See, we're supposed to, the church should be one, but we're supposed to be one with Jesus and him as the head. So God scattered them and confused their languages. And they've had that problem ever since. There's been nations warring. And one of the biggest problems we've had has been that I don't understand what that Japanese guy is saying to me, Frank. And when he talks different from me, I'm a little suspicious of him. You know, he looks kind of funny to me. And that German guy, Brother Baker, he said all kind of funny words I never heard before. How can we trust somebody like that? And so they scattered all over the earth based on all of that. But now, guess what we're talking about in the news again the last 4 or 5 years? Okay? America has come, for a while it was the big three powers. It was China and the Soviet Union and the United States. Where's the Soviet Union today? We're down to 2. China's fallen to the wayside. It's, the government, current government there is about to lose out with those people. There's enough people there, they're going to overthrow them soon and become an economy. We'll see more about economies and buying and selling in the next chapter when we study it. That's going to be the driving influence. What's the root of all evil after all? The love of money. Very good, Linda Joyce. There is a difference. The love of money is the root of all evil. When America began, it sprang from 2 colonies. One was up in Plymouth Rock. Remember the Pilgrims? Why did they come to America?
Worship God.
They came for love of God. They actually crossed the ocean in a rickety old boat, nearly sunk 2 or 3 times. Many of them, over half of them, died before the first year passed. But they did all that for love of God up at Plymouth. That was one colony. The other colony that started our country was way down in Virginia, Jamestown. Does anybody remember why Jamestown started? Well, there was all these rumors there was gold over there in America, right? And they found out that, Jim, that them Indians over there had this funny plant called tobacco. And that tobacco, boy, it does something to you. And people like what it does. So they started going over and growing tobacco and stuff and come back. And they didn't have enough hands to take over there. So finally they went down to Africa and loaded up a boat with people that didn't want to go and brought them over here. And what did that start in America? Slavery. So Jamestown was set up for love of money. Love of money, and then Plymouth was love of God. Could we safely say that throughout the history of our country, those 2 powers have fought against each other? If you look at our history, couldn't you say that that's pretty well how it's gone? The love of money fighting the love of God back and forth. We got Hollywood out here and New York and the big business, and big businesses everywhere saying do it this way. And for years, no shops were open on Sunday because people love God. And then one shop opened on Sunday because he wanted money. And us good Christian folks thought, well, I do need a loaf of bread. And it is Sunday, and he is open. So, Charlie, I guess I'll go down there. It ain't going to hurt nothing. And then before long, guess what happened in a few years? Right? Everything's open on Sunday, and suddenly Sunday and church doesn't mean so much anymore. See, the love of money won out over the love of God. And that's the battle we see in Revelation next time when we get to it. Verse 9. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. I'll touch on this just for a moment in case somebody out there might be a little bit of a world traveler, or at least reads about world travel. There's one city in the world that's called the city of 7 hills?
Rome.
The city of Rome is called the city of 7 hills. Has been from its beginning. That's the reason they chose that spot. Because there were 7 hills surrounding this place, and that was like a natural fort, Philip. See, back in those days, they just built some fortifications in the valleys. Boy, they had a pretty good defense right there, see? So it was a city of 7 hills. There are 7 kings. 5 are fallen. 1 is. The other is not yet come. When he cometh, he must continue a short space. For just a moment, take the little sheet of paper where your verses are and flip it over. Now, we talked about this once before, but I want to go over it one more time tonight right quick. Notice it said there's 7 kings. How many are fallen? How many of the kings? 5 are fallen. Thank you. Okay, look at your chart. And the 4th column there says 7 crowns. Okay? Go down and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 are fallen. 1 king is. What empire was in control of the world in Apostle John's day? The Roman Empire. And 1 is not yet. That's the beast empire that's going to come during the tribulation. But notice that Rome, it says it is, and that one will continue in one form or another from the day of the Apostle John until the Great Tribulation. Now notice 11. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So he's going to be part of this last system. 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet. 10 kings, but they didn't live in John's day, but will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. The beast is going to remember, his kingdom is going to come later on, endure for a short time. Can anybody tell me how long? We've gone over this a bunch of times. How long is this great tribulation period when he's reigning? It's a season. How long is this great tribulation?
7 years.
7 years. Actually, the first 3.5 years he's rising to power. At the middle of the tribulation, he becomes complete ruler. You know how? We know this? Because he institutes something and the whole world has to do it. What does he institute in the middle of the tribulation? The mark of the beast. So the only way I can say you do this and the whole world does it is if I'm the king of the whole world, right? So see, at the middle, so he's going to last basically 3.5 years, his kingdom will last. Now I find that kind of odd. Brother Baker, you may be able to tell me this. How long was Jesus' ministry?
3.5 years.
And now here this guy comes along and he's going to rule 3.5 years. Satan always copies God in everything. He is the Antichrist, after all, right? And that doesn't just mean opposed to Christ. That means replaces Christ. But one of the things that will bring him to power is the fact that the world will think he is the Christ to come. Do you realize that when Adolf Hitler went to power, 80% of the Christian churches in Germany backed that man? People in Germany said, this is the Messiah. He said, I'm bringing the Third Reich. That Reich meant a 1,000-year reign. Does that sound familiar? That's what Hitler was doing. I have video footage at home from World War II that shows classrooms singing hymns in glory and praise to Adolf Hitler, just as we sing them on Sunday morning here for Jesus. See? And that's what's going to happen during that 7-year period. I got lost here. Verse 12. Okay, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. I found that phrase unusual. 1 hour. Who would want to rule for 1 hour? Do we think that's literal or is it a symbol of some sort? WD, are you here tonight? Yeah, WD's here tonight. I'm going to need you for this next one, WD. Okay? John 2 and 4 gives us the key to this. Who has John 2 and 4?
Jesus said to her, woman, what have I to do with thee? My hour is not yet.
Okay, that's the story of the marriage at Cana. Remember where he turned the water into wine? And Mary, his mama, said, you know, we ain't got no wine. She didn't say do anything, but she hinted. Frank, you ever had somebody hint at you like, this ain't been done, you know, this needs doing, and I'm the man of the house, so guess what they're really saying? You need to do it. And he said, no, my hour's not yet come. Now, Jesus came to do a very important work, and at a certain hour, that work would begin. That's the point. Okay? Remember the night before, let this cup pass from me, but if not, I will drink it. And the next day, at a certain appointed hour, the third hour of the day, what happened to Jesus?
Crucifixion.
Okay, no, this was the night before the crucifixion. What would happen the third hour of the next day? 9 o'clock in the morning, what happened to Jesus the next day? He was crucified. It didn't happen in 1 hour, but it started at a certain hour. Okay? In other words, there's a certain point in time at which something's going to start. And that starting is at a certain hour it will begin. The best way I can explain it to you is a military term. Okay? WD, help me here. If an invasion is going to start in the military at a certain hour, that hour has a specific name. What's it called? I remember seeing D-Day. It talks about when you have a nuclear explosion or a rocket taken off, you're talking about a certain hour being called 0 hour. Ever heard that? 0 hour. Yeah, at 0 hour we're going to do so-and-so. Nobody knows when that hour is going to be, but at that hour it will start. It don't finish in an hour, but it starts. That's the same thing we're saying here. At a certain point in time, okay, there's going to be, those 10 kings will begin reigning with the Antichrist. Now, we also use that term when we're talking about Jesus coming back. Jesus is coming back, but nobody knows the day or the hour. See, when he comes back, it don't all end in an hour, but at a certain point in time, at that hour, it will start. Okay? 7:30 tomorrow morning is the hour I better be at work. But I'm going to be working all day long. But if I ain't there at 7:30, that's my 0 hour. What's going to happen at 8 o'clock, Frank? I'm in trouble, ain't I? Okay, so at a certain hour, things begin. Verse 15, he said unto me, let's go back to verse 13. These have one mind, shall give their power and strength unto the beast. The 10 kings will give all their power to him. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings. They that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. He said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. All the nations in the world, all the people of the world, will be under the control of this false religion, Mystery Babylon, and this one world government during that 3.5 years. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Now the 10 horns are actually what now? 10 what? Kings. So these 10 kings actually hate the religious system. And that'll be important when we study next time. And shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Significant. Jim's looking at me funny. He knows what I'm talking about. Burn her with fire. Now remember, we're not talking about a lady here. We're not talking about a woman. We're talking about Mystery Babylon, or Babylon, which is a city and a religious system. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, to agree. Why are they able to do this? Why do they hate this woman? Because God wants them to. To give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Now, all through this, John and Jesus is describing to us a city. And you can guess and discuss back and forth, but when you get to the end verse, you just about can't get around what city this is in all the world. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. At the time of the Apostle John, only one city reigned over the kings of the earth. What city was that? Rome. But notice now the system's not called Mystery Rome, right? It's called Mystery Babylon. Although it's at the city of Rome, it didn't start there. In other words, it started way, way back at the Tower of Babel, all these false religions, and it finally centers when the Christian church begins in Rome. And surely enough, if you'll flip back here into Paul's writings, his very first book is to who? The Romans. There was a church at Rome, a Christian church at Rome. But that Christian church that was at Rome, is it anything like the Roman Catholic Church today? No. Not at all. There's a lot of funny stuff in that church that wasn't back there Jesus never talked about. There's popes, there's monks, there's nuns, there's these statues you pray to. Did Jesus say do any of that stuff? In fact, what do the Ten Commandments say about doing that kind of stuff? See, the religion that was in Babel spread over the world because God confused the languages, and they all took it with them when they spread over the world. Every country, although they're widely separated, there's similar things in their religions. Now, one of the things that's happening today is called the New Age movement, and all these religions are coming back together again. In 1948, they started a thing called the National Council of Churches. National Council of Churches was set up so that all Christian denominations could come together. Sounds like a good idea, don't it, J.K.? Sounds like, but it's gone far beyond that. Now there's a World Council of Churches, and this year they met, and they're asking all religions to come together. They're wanting Indian tribes to bring their witch doctors in. They're asking African natives to bring their native religions in.
That is more the political movement.
Yes, sir.
That's not church at all.
Exactly. In other words, something has happened, right? They're still calling themselves Christians, but the center now of the New Age movement, the one character that's coming to the top, is Pope John Paul II. He's meeting with the heads of all religions around the world today, saying, we're all believing the same thing. Let's all come together and work together. Now, this book has just told us there's going to be a one-world religion in the last days, and it's going to be the bloodiest outfit ever was. And you're going to take a mark, or you're going to have your head chopped off. They won't even sell you food if you need it in the last days because of a one-world religion that will be in place. Now, this religion's been hostile to Christians since the very beginning. The Old Testament saints were killed by pagan worshipers. The New Testament saints were killed mostly in the first century by what empire? The Roman Empire. Down through the history, from the days of Rome to now, millions of Christians have died. Can anybody tell me what one religious system has killed more Christians than any other? Estimates are around 50 million Christians has died at the hands of this group. They come close. Diocletian began it, and the Roman Catholic Church through the Dark Ages. Don't take my word for it. Go to the library and look for a book called Fox's Book of Martyrs.
People don't know this, but when you look at that, a lot of this history came out of the secular recording of history, and it's actual fact. It's what happened, and it's right fact.
It's just not spoken of much in our part of the world.
Baptists cooked that up. The Baptists didn't have anything to do with what went on there, but it's been recorded not only by but other people rather than religious people. Others been recorded otherwise, and it's a fact.
Right. And still today in third world nations, Christian missionaries are constantly being badgered, driven from areas, and a lot of occasions just vanishing because of the influence of the Roman Catholic Church and other pagan groups in their area. I have a friend at work that's from Ecuador, and he says he didn't believe what the Roman Catholic Church is like up here because he saw it down there when it was killing people and driving out Christian missionaries and doing things. What they're seeing down there, we're going to see all over the world, I'm afraid, someday. Now remember, it's not just the Roman Catholic Church, but that's going to be the centerpiece. And that's what they're saying tonight, that from Rome is going to grow a system that's going to finally bring all these religions back together again. And that's what's going to be one of the biggest causes of the trouble all through the Great Tribulation period.
But then Constantine, he done that back in the Dark Ages. Didn't he?
Huh?
Constantine, he brought them all together in the Dark Ages.
Very good, yes. Constantine was one of the big beginners of the movement. Back through the Dark Ages, Christians were tormented for years by these various groups. Also, keep in mind that the saddest thing about all this is that over 50 million believers have been killed down through history and they were doing it in the name of Christ.
Well, we said here in Belleville, we have a religion, but if you check it real close, you'll find that our United States Congress up there is so dominated with Catholics that the ones that are not Catholics lean to the Catholics. Now, that's right. That's the way they think.
It's a great political power, yes. In fact, we see that all through here, that the religious system of that day is so interlinked
Great
with
majority
the world government.
are either Catholics or they lean toward that same thing. In other words, they sympathize with the Catholic thinking, and so our Congress, that causes a lot of the actions that we get in the Congress.
That's right. Any other questions? Thank you for your time.